Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Loholt. I guess we might think of it as the Jesus job description. When the prophet Isaiah offered some of his prophecies, no one really understood what he was talking about. But after Jesus, we can look back and see that he was telling us in advance about who Jesus was and what he would do. One such passage is found in Isaiah 42. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison those who sit in darkness. Certainly one way to interpret that is to understand that Jesus brings the gift of healing to people, expressed in Jesus opening the eyes of the blind. Another way to think about what this passage means is that Jesus is to bring perception and understanding about what God is doing among us. That may be the way most people are blind. Not only don't we see it, but most times we aren't even looking. This week we are considering Bible stories in which people who are blind receive their sight. And today we have one of those blind stories that we struggle with. In this healing of a blind man, Jesus touches the man twice in order for him to be fully healed. The passage is found in Mark chapter 8. They come to Bethsaida. Some people brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had put saliva on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Can you see anything?" And the man looked up and said, "I can see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he looked intently, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Then he sent him away to his home, saying, "Do not even go into the village." Before we jump in, I do want to point out that it was the blind man's friends who brought him to Jesus. So often we ignore the importance of the faith of the people around us shaping our own faith. Like the paralytic who was lowered through the roof, this man's friends took it upon themselves to present this man to Jesus. That's a blessing in our lives. The next really interesting thing that happens in this story is that Jesus takes the man out of the village, away from the crowds. I think that Jesus did that for a couple of reasons. First, Jesus was often concerned about defining what it meant to be the Messiah himself and not be saddled with the expectations of the crowds. Secondly, and more importantly, I think this was how Jesus preserved this man's dignity. Jesus didn't want this man or his healing put on public display. There would certainly be enough of that after he was healed. We spoke yesterday about how they believed that saliva had healing properties, but I don't think Jesus thought that so much as this was a way to communicate and to fulfill the expectations of the blind man. The saliva was part of what the blind man thought a healing ought to include. The part we struggle with in this story is the two touches. In other miracles, Jesus touched just once, or even just spoke the word and it was done. Why did Jesus touch this man twice? Well, as we have spoken of earlier this week, seeing operates on two levels. There is physical sight, and there is perception, particularly about who Jesus is. Now let's notice all that is going on around this miracle story. Jesus feeds the 5,000, multiplying the loaves and fishes. He walks on water. He does other healings. Yet his disciples, seeing it all, don't perceive who Jesus is. The priests and religious leaders see it too, and likewise they don't perceive. Jesus predicts his passion and death, speaking in detail, but no one gets it. Peter confesses Christ, but sees imperfectly, not really knowing what he says or what it means. In other words, they all of them, need a second touch in order to see clearly. They need the touch of the cross and the empty tomb. You see, the point is that Jesus didn't need the 2 touches to heal the man properly. Rather, the man needed 2 touches in order to see clearly. With 2 touches, he not only saw, he understood. That's the gift of Jesus. When Jesus heals, he heals wholly. In the hands of Jesus, we are made whole. Here at Redeemer, our church council meets in a conference room to make decisions for the church. There, together, we seek God's will for us and our family of faith. In that conference room, we have only one picture hanging on the wall, and it's a picture of a kneeling man and a hand a few inches away from the man's eyes. In that picture, some people see the hand of Jesus moving toward the man to heal his blindness, and that's a great way to understand the painting. I hung that picture there, however, because I see it exactly the opposite way. I think of it as portraying that moment just after Jesus has removed his hand, that moment when sight and insight arrive. In that room, we meet to seek and discern God's way for our family of faith. In that room, we pray for that sight and insight. So here at the end, I have a simple prayer for us all. May God touch us twice and grant us sight and insight. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.